There's a lot of people out there that have old computers, desktops or laptops that are sometimes 12, 15 years old that do everything that they need to do, but they just seem to be getting a little slower. And I have found over the years that one of the best ways to give your old computer an upgrade is to simply replace the hard drive. Now, there's some situations where the hard drive is actually going bad and needs to be replaced, or sometimes you just want to give it an upgrade without having to go buy a brand new computer. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take this old computer with a spinning hard drive and we're going to put an SSD drive in there, and it's going to give it a whole new lease on life. And don't worry if you have a desktop, an all-in-one, or a mini computer. The process is exactly the same throughout. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to show you how to do it on a laptop because there are certain things that you need to know if you're doing it on a laptop versus a desktop. There's all kinds of different scenarios. I'm going to try to cover all of that. On this channel, we do the what and the why and then the how. So if there's any point that you already feel like you know what I'm about to say, go ahead and skip ahead. But this video is designed primarily for those people who have never gone inside their computer but don't necessarily want to spend the money to pay somebody to upgrade their computer. But I'm going to try to cover as many bases as I can for you. Now, there's a handful of different scenarios depending on your situation. And again, I'm going to try to cover all of those. If you have a computer that you can actually log into and get into Windows, that's ideal because Device Manager will show us exactly what kind of hard drive that we're upgrading from. And that's important because if you have an old spinning hard drive and you want to upgrade to a faster SSD, you kind of need to make sure that you have an old spinning hard drive. In this example, that's exactly what we have. We have an old spindle drive and we want to go to a no moving parts SSD, which is going to be anywhere from 5 to 30 times faster than the old hard drive. In this particular situation, the computer actually works, but it's just getting slower and slower and slower. So instead of just wiping Windows and reinstalling it on the old spindle drive, we decided to spend a few extra bucks and go with the faster technology because that's going to make this old laptop seem like it's brand new again. But again, we need to make sure that we know what we're upgrading from. So I'm going to show you a couple different ways to find out what drive you have inside your machine already. So this is scenario one. This is a working computer, but because of time or age or potential failing hardware, it just is really, really slow. But I'm going to show you the first way to see what hardware you have and how to easily look it up so you know exactly what we're upgrading from. Now, the simplest way on any modern Windows computer is just to go to Device Manager from your Start menu. And all Device Manager is basically just a list of all the hardware that's inside your computer. So to find out what you have, you're going to go to the disk drive section and you're going to double click it here. And that's going to give you a make and model. So as you can see from here, we have a Toshiba MQ04ABF100. I'm going to literally just take that exact information and then I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to type that in. And I'll just click on any product link here that matches that model. And the first thing you're going to notice is that you see a big spinning platter right here in the middle. That tells you right off the bat that it is an old mechanical drive. But the trick here, even if you don't have a picture, is look for RPM, is revolutions per minute, and that means that it is in fact an old spinning mechanical hard drive. We call them spinners, or you've heard the term HDD, hard disk drive. That is what that is. But if you see RPM, you know for a fact it is a mechanical drive. And so what we're going to do is we're going to replace this old spinning drive with an SSD drive that has no moving parts because that's going to make it a lot faster. The connections on the drive are exactly the same with an SSD as they are with the mechanical drive, and that's why this is actually a really easy process. I know I'm throwing a lot at you here in this video, and that's okay. I'm going to save all the Q&A to the very end, and you might want to watch that because I might very well answer the question you might have. So now we have all the hardware that we need, but the most important thing that we need to take care of first is backing up the data from the old drive, and then we have a way to transfer it over to the new one. Because especially in a laptop, which usually only has one slot for a storage drive, once you replace that, the data is going to be on the old drive and you need to get that first. That's really the most important thing. The box, the tower, the laptop, all that stuff, that's really not that important. What's important is what's on the drive. So if you haven't backed up your data first, go ahead and do that now. As you can see, I've already got a flash drive plugged in here, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new folder. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get all the documents, the pictures, the downloads, everything copied to this flash drive before we even start taking anything apart. That is the most important thing. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do that now. You know, I didn't just wake up one day and know all this stuff. Back when I started in the IT industry, you had two choices if you wanted to start moving up the ladder. You could go to school and get an actual degree, or you could desperately try to find someone willing to hire you with little or no experience. And believe me, that second path was not easy. But today, with this video's sponsor, Coursera, you can skip all of that and go straight to learning. Coursera Plus gives you unlimited access to 10,000 plus courses, professional certificates, specializations from leading universities and companies, including Google, IBM, Microsoft, and Meta. So whether you want to learn IT support, cybersecurity, AI, data analytics, project management, business, or just basic productivity skills, Coursera gives you a structured way to learn at your own pace from your own computer on your schedule. And no, I'm not saying one course is going to magically guarantee you a new job or a pay raise. But building in-demand skills is one of the most practical ways to invest in yourself, stay competitive, and open up more opportunities over time. So if you're wanting to upgrade your skill set, check out Coursera Plus at the link at the top of my description for a special promo up to 50% off Coursera Plus Annual, available for a limited time. I'll also include links to a few relevant courses below that. Thanks so much to Coursera for sponsoring today's video. Start learning today. So now we got all of our files safely backed up, which means that no matter what happens to the computer, we got our data. That's the most important thing. But you may be saying, well, what if my computer doesn't boot up? How do I get the files off that old drive? Not that big of a deal. We'll address that in a little bit. What I want to do now is go ahead and get this laptop open, physically show you how to swap the drives, and then from there, all it is just installing Windows, and then there's a couple steps to get the files off the old drive onto the new one. Now, back in the day, it used to be a lot easier to take a laptop apart. Usually there'd be just one panel here for a drive and one panel here for memory. You could take one screw out and boom, you just pop it out, pop a new one in. They make it a little more complicated now, and there's usually multiple screws, and usually the back cover comes off. I'm not going to go in depth on how to do this particular one. If you're not sure how to take your laptop apart, if you just look on the back here, there's a sticker with a model number, and you could just simply go to YouTube, type in the make, the model, followed by the word disassembly, and somebody will literally show you on YouTube how to take this exactly apart to get to that hard drive. I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead because I already know how to do this, and there's no reason for you to watch this specific thing, but that's all you have to do. That's how a lot of tech people learn how to do this. Just go to YouTube and look it up. It's super simple, and just click on links to find somebody that will show you exactly how to take apart your specific model. And that YouTube lookup also applies to anybody who might have an all-in-one computer. The process is going to be the same as far as disassembly. If you have a desktop computer though, once you take that back panel off, you're going to see your old hard drive sitting in here like this. These older hard drives, you're going to have two connections here. One is data right here, which as you can see plugs down into the motherboard. You can just set that aside for now. And then the other one is your power, which connects to your computer's power supply right here. These are what the connections are going to look like here. Here's your power and here's your data. Just about every modern hard drive is going to have these two connections. This is called SATA. If yours doesn't look like this, your laptop or desktop is probably way too old for an SSD to even make a difference, because that's old, what they call IDE technology. I wouldn't even bother with that. I would just, it's time to get a new computer. But if you have a SATA connection here, it could be up to around 15 years old. This technology has been around for a while. But if you have these two ports, you're good to go. So we're going to take this old, slow drive, and we're going to replace it with this little tiny SSD right here. And you might be noticing, well, how are we going to put that little tiny drive into this computer to where it fits right here? Unfortunately, SSDs, with a few exceptions in server environments, these SSD drives are actually going to be basically the size of laptop drives. As I was showing you before with the laptop, you can see they're very similar in size. And if you look here, they are literally exactly the same. Let me show you the connections. Both of these use SATA connections. The difference is you got a spinning drive here and no moving parts here. The bigger question is, how do we get this tiny drive into here? Unfortunately, you're going to need what they call a mounting bracket. It basically makes this drive fit into the slot for this drive. They're usually no more than about 10 bucks. I'll put a link in the description if you need one of those. I've found over the years that you don't absolutely have to use one. They're all going to have screws like this that are for mounting plates. So if you have one screw that you can put in here and it holds this drive up with no problem, you don't necessarily even need a mounting bracket. Good idea, but it's not required, especially if the machine isn't going to move around a whole lot. One thing we need to note for later, when we're talking about transferring your data, these two right here are going to go into the SSD drive that we're going to replace. But then we need to connect the old drive to the computer, in this case the desktop, but maybe that's all that's available. There aren't any other connections here. Most of the time you're going to at least have one extra set that you can use to plug a second drive in, but if you don't, you can always pull the connections out of your CD or DVD drive if you have one and use that as well. Because remember, all we're doing is transferring data from one drive to the other. Once you get the data off the old drive, you can just plug your CD or DVD drive right back in. But temporarily you can absolutely use these, and now with this you can have the new drive connected and then the old drive and then transfer the data, which I will show you how to do all that later. Now there is one important thing to note is if you have a working computer, I would recommend leaving that up and running first, because in order to install Windows on this new drive, which is completely empty, you're going to need what's called a Windows installer disk. Now I've made a bunch of videos in the past about how to do this, but you will need a dedicated flash drive, a separate flash drive that's got to be at least 8 gigabytes of space. And again, as I said many times before, do not use a flash drive that has personal data on it because it will be wiped. You need to use a clean or brand new drive to go to Microsoft, download the installer, create the installer disk, and then what we'll do is once we put the new drive in the computer, we boot to this, and then this installs Windows on the hard drive. I'm not going to go in depth on how to do that. I will link a video up top here to show you exactly how to do that step by step to create the Windows installer. If you have a working computer, I would recommend go ahead and using that one to create the installer. But if you don't have a working computer, or you're trying to replace the drive on a non-working computer, you'll need to go somewhere else and create this installer disk. But for now, I've got the installer ready to go, so all I have to do is swap the hard drives and boot to this drive. Now again, every laptop is going to be different, but for the most part, the concept is the same. This one actually is really easy. It was just one panel, kind of like the old style, but once you get that off, you've got your hard drive right here, the old spinning hard drive, and then we've got memory sticks in here. Sometimes they'll have a couple screws in here holding the drive down. In this case, it does not. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use a little plastic tool here, and I'm just going to slide that drive back like this. Then once I've done that, usually there's a little piece of paper or plastic right here. You could just literally lift this drive right out like this. Sometimes they'll come with some type of enclosure to help it fit down in here. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they just fit right on here and you don't have to screw anything. In this case, there's 4 screws holding this enclosure onto the drive. So I need to take that off and then swap the drives. Once I got the screws out, you can see the drive, boom, lifts right out, and there we go. So this drive is our old drive, and we definitely want to set this aside because we're going to need it to get the data off of it. Again, this is a situation where the drive doesn't boot up, or Windows doesn't boot up, or the drive is possibly failing. So I'm going to show you how to do all that here in a little bit. In the meantime, we're going to take the new SSD and we're just going to reverse the process, and we're going to put the screws right back in with this new, lighter, faster drive. You're going to want to make sure that these ports right here line up properly with these. There's only one way it can go in, and you can look and see there's a shorter end and a longer end. In this case, it would go in just like this, which means this needs to be the top. So I'm going to go ahead and start putting my screws back in the enclosure here. And if you have big dopey hands like me, it may take you a little bit longer. Now you can just set the drive back in just like this. Sometimes you may have to push it in a little bit to get it to fit, but that's the whole purpose of the enclosure, is to make sure that it fits properly. And just push it down like that. And again, with preferably a plastic tool, slide it right into those SATA ports right here. Now normally I would tell you to go ahead and put the cover back on and screw it down, but the reason I have gotten in the habit of not doing that is simply because what if something goes wrong? Then I have to take the whole thing apart again and start over. So for now, as long as the drive is kind of relatively in place, it should be fine there. But for now, I'm just going to flip it back over. I'm going to take my Windows installer disk, and I'm just going to plug it into a flash drive. And now I've got the new SSD drive in there, and it is ready to install. So I'm going to press the power button, and depending on your model, it may be, you got to press escape or F2. I think it's F12 on Dell's. Either way, what we're trying to do is we're trying to tell the computer, don't try to boot to that primary hard drive, boot to the flash drive, and we have booted to that flash drive, and we are now on the Windows installation screen. We're going to go ahead and choose install Windows 11, and the setup is going to start. We're going to get all the typical Windows installation prompts, more of the please wait and all that stuff, no big deal. And eventually it's going to bring up our hard drive here. I don't know if you can see it here, but the first drive that it pulls up is an empty 476 gig, which is actually the 512 gig SSD drive, unallocated space. So we're going to make sure that drive is selected, not our flash drive, but that drive. And then we're going to click next. And then we're going to get a message here saying, you won't be able to use your PC during the installation, save and close your files, blah, blah, blah. We're going to install Windows 11 Home. We're going to keep nothing. That's fine. Click install. Then you'll get a message saying installing Windows 11. Your PC will restart several times. This might take a while. Now you just got to sit back and wait a few minutes. Just a few minutes later, you start getting the Windows setup screens where you can just go ahead and continue. I'm not going to go through all this because it's a standard Windows setup. You just click all the appropriate prompts, except this one here where it's let's connect you to a network. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Shift F10. That is going to bring up a black DOS box, and I'll put this on the screen so you can see it. What this is doing right now, it's going to force us to connect to Microsoft, and this bypass, which ironically still works but won't forever, Microsoft is going to shut it down. What you can do right here is to bypass Microsoft requirements and just keep a local account is type OOBE /bypass NRO. Hit enter and your computer is going to restart, and it's going to go through the initial setup one more time, but it's going to allow you to say I don't have internet. It'll make more sense in a second. All right, we're back to the setup screen. We're going to click yes for country and region, and again, typical Microsoft setup screen. Yes, yes, skip, blah, blah, blah. But now on the internet screen, you'll see down here at the bottom, it says I don't have internet. Click on that, and then that will allow you to create a local account. Just type your name, and then you don't have to connect to Microsoft at all. And then just like with any other Windows setup, just continue sitting and waiting, and eventually you'll get to your Windows desktop, and I'll show you a couple things that you need to know. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it with the overhead here, but a lot of the stuff is missing from the start menu now that we're at the desktop. Once we connect to the internet, all of this will fill in, and it will be a fully ready to go Windows installation. One of the things I wanted to show you is the difference in speed between the old spinning hard drive and the SSD drive. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to restart this computer in real time so you can see just how fast it boots up. The last time with the spindle drive, this thing took anywhere from 4 to 6 minutes to boot up. Now, I'm going to guess that this will boot probably in less than 60 seconds. You can see we already have our Windows logo. It's starting up. And just like that, within about 20 seconds, we are at the Windows desktop. And just so you understand, this is something that will work on just about any old computer. This one in particular is a quad-core i3, so it's probably about 15 years old. But if you look, I mean, it's just really super fast, especially for a 15-year-old computer. And guess what? You didn't have to spend $300, $400, $500 on a new computer just replacing a hard drive. So now that this is up and running, I'm going to go ahead and let Windows Update finish doing all the updates for all the hardware inside. And for the most part, on the installation, we're done. Now, if you recall, we backed everything up on the working computer to a flash drive. So at this point, all you have to do is plug this in and start copying your documents to your documents folder and pictures to pictures and so on. You've got everything already backed up on the flash drive, and you can put it back on the new installation of Windows, install whatever software you need, and you're good to go. That's all great for computers that you can boot up and copy your files, but what happens if you've got a computer that you're upgrading the drive because the old drive is either bad or failing or Windows is corrupted? I'm going to show you how to do that, but it does require a couple extra things. Laptops and all-in-ones are basically the same technology. What you're going to need is some type of drive enclosure to take the old hard drive, the old spinning drive, and connect it like you would a flash drive. Basically what this does is it gives you access to that storage drive. But just plugging it in isn't enough, and I'll show you what I mean. One of the ones that I recommend and I use every single day is this one made by Sabrent. What I love about it is it's got connections for both a 2.5-inch SATA and a 3.5-inch desktop drive, so you can use either one of those And also going forward for newer technology, it also has an M.2 slot here. So if you upgrade to an even newer computer down the road, you can literally pop this out, pop the other drives in, and copy your data. And it even has the ability to clone a drive, which is really cool. I'll put a link in the description for this. I use this every day. I love it. Okay, so now we've got Windows up and running, but we still have our data to back up, either to copy from a flash drive, which if you got it on a flash drive from a working computer, you're pretty much done. Just copy the data over and you're ready to rock and roll. Once you confirm all your data is off the old drive onto the new one, then you can use that as a storage device or get rid of it or whatever. And if you have a desktop, if you remember what I told you before about the multiple connections, so say for example, this is our new SSD drive, but remember I told you there's usually an extra set of connections. So you don't need an external drive. You can just simply take your old spinning drive and connect it like this, and then that will recognize as a new drive letter. So this is going to end up being drive C, the SSD in your new computer. And then when you plug this one in, you need to make sure you turn the computer off first, plug it in, turn the computer on, and then this will usually show up as drive D or drive E, depending on whether you have a CD drive or not. But either way, just know that you won't need anything else if you have that extra set of connectors. So whether you need an external drive like this, or you can just connect it in your desktop, the process for getting the files off the drive is exactly the same. I'm going to show you how to do that right now. All right, so I'm going to go back to picking on my laptop again. I've got the portable drive hooked up with the old spinning drive plugged into it. And as soon as I plug it into the computer, give it just a second, and now you'll see that old drive pop up right here. In this case, it's drive letter D. And then, of course, if I double click it, I can see the entire Windows structure from that old drive. In this case, I go to the users folder, and there's all the users' profiles. So we have this profile here called Dale, which was the owner of the computer. If you click on it, you're going to get the message saying you don't currently have permission to access this folder. And that's generally because that account was password protected. So there's an easy way around it. And if you just follow the steps exactly as I show you here, it'll be super easy. And then you can just simply copy your stuff to this new drive, no problem. So what you want to do is you want to make note of the path. Okay. So in this case, for example, this is the folder called Dale. Okay, D-A-L-E. And if you click up here, you'll see it's on the D users folder. Again, go back to the PC, drive D, and then users, and then there's the folder that we cannot currently access. So close your Windows File Explorer. If you go to the search box, you type in the letters Charlie Michael David, CMD, okay? Click on Run as Administrator. And then go ahead and click Yes if prompted for the security. You're going to get this window right here, which is basically what we used to call a DOS box, but it's called a command prompt. What we're trying to do is we're trying to tell Windows it's okay for us to access those files that we just currently couldn't access by clicking on them. And there's a Windows command, an old DOS command, that you can use to do this. It's called take own, as in take ownership. So what you're going to do, from that prompt, type in TAKE and then OWN, and then type /letter F, and then in quotes, type in the path to that folder. And remember, in this case, it was D:\users\Dale, and then another quote. And what that does, inside those quotes, it says, go to this folder and take ownership of it. And then after that, you're going to type another space, /R, space, /D, as in David, and then space, and then just the letter Y, no slashes or anything. So take own /F, quote, path name, quote, space, /R, space, /D, space, Y for yes. And then all you have to do is hit enter. And then what's going to happen is then Windows is going to start doing this. And it's going to look like a hot mess. But if you were to slow this down, it's literally going and finding all the files and folders in there that are inside that path, and then it's basically going to give you permission to them. And then once we have that done, we can go back to the D folder, back to the users folder, and then back to that folder, and it's going to give us that same error message, but you can click continue. And while it's waiting to come up, I scrolled back on this message here, and you can see where it says the folder contacts, cookies, documents, downloads, favorites, whatever, all these individual folders, including pictures, music, and all that, is now owned by this new desktop configuration. In other words, the new Windows install on this drive. And sometimes it takes a minute before it to come up. If you double click on it again, you might get that error message. Eventually it should come up and give you access to those folders. Doesn't always happen right away. Sometimes you have to close it and reopen it, but most importantly, it will eventually pull that up. And depending on the shape and the condition of the old drive, it may take a while. So sometimes it just takes a few minutes to sit back and just wait, but eventually you'll see all of the user's folders, the documents, downloads, desktop, pictures, music, video, all that stuff. So if it doesn't happen immediately, just sit back and be patient. It will happen. Now, I did let this run for a while. It still hasn't pulled up the folders, which can happen if the drive, if the old drive has got some damage on it. And I know this one did, because I saw it when I first started this whole process. It took 5 to 10 minutes to boot up, and so I knew it had some issues, and it looks like it maybe has an issue with the file structure. So there is another way to access these files. It's a little bit more complicated and a little bit of a pain, but I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm going to close this, open the File Explorer again, go back to that D drive, go back to the users folder, but instead of double clicking on it, I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to go to Properties. And when this window comes up, I want to click on Security, and then I'm going to click on Advanced. And right here, next to Owner, I'm going to click Change. And I'm just going to type Administrators. I'm going to click Check Names, and you'll see it should have an underline here. You can click OK. Once it has administrators here, I'm going to check this box to replace owner on subcontainers and objects and click Apply. But you might get a pop-up window saying you don't have permissions to read the contents of that. All permissions will be replaced if you press yes. Go ahead and click yes, and you'll see here where it's going to go through and do another pass on the changing of the administrator permissions so that you have access to those files. Now, the reason I don't like this version or this way of doing it is because it seems like every folder that it tries to change permissions, it's going to prompt you again, so you have to click yes over and over and over again. Now, it will eventually let you finish. Once it's all done changing ownership, then you'll have access to those files. But this process requires you to sit here and click OK every time it asks you, which it's kind of a pain, but it does work. If it runs into folders like this where you see it looks like it's not doing anything, that's generally because that folder might be one of those damaged folders that couldn't automatically change. So at some point we'll probably get an error message of some kind, or it'll finally get through it and allow you to continue. Either way, you just have to sit here and click yes every time. And you can see where it kind of got stuck on that one folder, and then it got past it, and it's going to continue on. To me, typing that take own command is just so much easier because it just runs and you don't have to do anything. But if sometimes that doesn't work, and this is an alternative, this is the point and click version. And like I said, I prefer the typing the command and walking away, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. And sometimes you get lucky and you don't have to sit here and click OK all day long. You'll just get a message saying, if you've just taken ownership of this object, you'll need to close and reopen the blah, 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 blah. Click OK. Now, close your File Explorer window and then just open it right back up. Go to this PC, go to our D drive, go to our users folder, and then click on our folder again. And just like that, there is all of our stuff. Now, whether you do it this way or using that flash drive, the contents are going to be the same. So you can just, while you still have it here in this folder, just go over here under this PC and click on the arrow next to the C drive and then the arrow next to users. And you'll see here I set this up with the same username. So all you have to do is click once on these folders and then drag them on top of the folder name that is on this new machine, And what it'll do is it'll put those files exactly where they go, just like they were on the old machine. So you're maintaining that file structure, and everything is just going to go exactly where it's supposed to go. So your desktop, documents, downloads, music, usually pictures. There's OneDrive, copy that over. It may or may not work for you. If it's, you may get an error message like this because it's not currently connected to OneDrive. That's okay, just skip that. And then everything else, just drag and drop right there. And so now, if this user wants to go to his downloads, there they are right there. And that is all there is to getting files off an old drive onto a new one. Now we just wait for the files to copy, and we're done. So one question you might have is, once I get all this done, what do I do with the old hard drive? Once you are sure that you've got everything off that old hard drive, now you could use that as a spare storage drive or put it in another computer or do whatever you want with it. But definitely do not get rid of it until you are 100% sure that you got all your stuff. Another question might be, how do I create this Windows installer if I can't get into my computer? Yeah, unfortunately, you are going to have to find either another working computer in the house, or you could even go to your public library and create it there. But you have to have a working computer in order to download the files and create the flash drive. Another question might be, what if the hard drive is damaged and I can't access the files on it? Well, thankfully, I've partnered with a great guy named Brian who runs a company called $300 Data Recovery. I'll put the links in the description. You can check that out. You can send the drive off to him. His team will get your drive, get the data off of it, and get your data back to you safely. 100% recommend it. I'm proud to partner with them. You might be saying, well, I'm ready to do this, but I don't know which one to buy. The good news is most SSDs are pretty standard. Some of them are more expensive because they're faster or better rated. My email address is in my bio. Feel free to send me an email and say, hey, I don't know which one to buy. Can you help me? I'll be happy to send an email back to you with a product link, and you can purchase that, and then you'll have everything that you need. One question I get all the time is, if I use a flash drive to create this Windows installer, what happens to the data that's on it? I usually say it at least 2 to 10 times every single time I make a video. Do not use a flash drive that has data on it, because that flash drive will be wiped during the installation process. If you need a clean, empty flash drive to create this Windows installer, I will put a link in the description. You can click on that and have it shipped right to your door. But do not use a drive that has data on it if you care about that data, because it will be deleted. The most common question I get when it comes to hard drive to SSD upgrades is it really going to make that much difference? Is it really going to make that computer that much faster? I promise you it is. Like I said earlier, anywhere from 5 to 50 times faster. And why is that? Well, SSDs have no moving parts. If there's no moving parts, there's no friction. Friction is what slows hard drives down. A typical spinning hard drive has a little needle that has to go search the entire drive and find the data that you're trying to look at. An SSD just goes boop right to it and pops it up. It's like if you go to Walmart the day before Christmas and there's baskets everywhere, and whatever you need is in one of those baskets, you will find it, but you have to go search every single basket. Versus going to Walmart at 7:30 in the morning, where everything has been stocked and shelved overnight, and what you need is exactly where you need it. You get it, you go through checkout, and boom, you're done. That's kind of the difference between a hard drive that has to go search for stuff and an SSD that just says, boop, I got it. And for a lot of you who don't want to spend the money to buy a new computer, this is actually a really inexpensive upgrade. Even though hard drives are a little more expensive now, the prices will come down. But going forward, it's certainly cheaper than buying a new computer, unless you just really want to buy a new one. Another common question is, what about my Windows license when I replace one drive with the other? The good news is if your computer is already activated through Microsoft, replacing the hard drive is not going to cause any issues. Your activation key is embedded into the motherboard on your computer, so when you pop a new drive in there and you install Windows, it's going to automatically activate, so no worries there. And just like that, you installed a new drive. And as you can see, it's not terribly complicated as long as you think through the entire process. So if you were able to actually do this by yourself, let me know down in the comments and how you feel about the new SSD drive. Now there is one other thing that you can do. If you have a working drive, most of the process as far as removing the drive is the same, but you can do what's called a drive clone. And what that does is it actually lets you take a current working drive with all of your stuff, all of your installed apps, all of your configurations, and create a duplicate of it onto an SSD drive, which you can just then swap with the old drive. Now, that's way too much for this video. I did make a dedicated video on how to clone a drive, and I'll put that over here. You could check that out. If you do watch it, there is one small caveat that I need to update the video. It's make sure you uncheck registration for the Macrium software, because it is actually free unless you check the box. I hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Scott Merrill. This is Ask Your Computer Guy. We'll see you in the next one.